I'm gonna do all the intro and shit after, so you don't get a chance to like be humble. I just get to pump your tires. So first off, I guess we'll make it somewhat formal. Tim Riley, welcome to the show.
Jordan, thank you for having me, dude.
No, man, a pleasure. Least I could do after all the hospitality. Although I must say, back in Toronto now, after 3 4 days in the Texas heat, I'm thriving. I've just been so grateful to not be where you guys are. Unbelievable. Are you from Texas? You're
You're
not from
back in
Texas
your
originally.
element. I'm
Dude,
not. I'm from
facts.
Nashville though, and like it's not quite as hot, but like it's in Nashville it's a valley, and so it's just as humid, and it's only a few degrees cooler. So I'm kind of used, growing up in the South, the heat is just kind of. And honestly, Jordan, I'm the opposite of you. I prefer intense heat over being cool or cold, and cold is like I can't do it, which is really ironic because I'm a ginger, and if I spend more than 5 minutes in the sun, I'm getting scorched to the bone. So I'm in a rock and a hard place here.
I I'm curious if was there a culture shock moving from Nashville to Austin?
No, there's actually a lot of overlap. Like Nashville. Now, if anyone from Texas hears this, they're going to get bent out of shape. They always do. Culturally speaking, Tennessee is southern. Texas is just in the south. And Texas has its own ethos. Like it's, I know that sounds funny, but like if you're east of the Mississippi and you grow up in what I consider to be the southern, like the southeast, there's some difference there. Like the hospitality piece and like people holding doors for each other and stuff like that. Austin is like this little pocket where especially coming from Nashville, like there's a lot of music overlap, even like the Sixth Street here and Broadway in Nashville have a lot of similarities. Like that's where everyone goes to get blackout drunk on their bachelorette and bachelor parties, and like it's just like. And then there's like a lot of good food adjacent to that area, and it's kind of outdoorsy. So there's a lot of overlap. Um, yeah, I actually resented Texas before I got here because everyone I ever met from Texas, it was like people who were from New York. The first thing they're going to tell you is how they're from New York or they're from Texas. And then I got here and I was like, you know what? It's all right. I do like it here.
So, I mean, you have an interesting contrast to me in cultures on the training side. Like, most people probably know you from the work you do with NFL offseason athletes, but your work at UT, if I had to line up two different sports, not even skill wise or athleticism wise, like locker room wise. Like, lacrosse in Canada is, it's kind of a second place to hockey, but it's box lacrosse, right? So box lacrosse, you're basically on where the ice was a few months ago, and it's just cement, and it's fast and it's rough and it's mean. Not that field is any different, but there's a certain, and I didn't know this, there's a certain culture to lacrosse in the States that I was unaware of. Now, if I had to create an antithesis to the football culture that I've kind of adopted and gotten to know through my work with NFL offseason and so on, it would
Uh
look a lot like lacrosse culture. Give me a little bit of
huh.
like the professional background of, the strength coaching side and the athletes you've worked with.
Yeah. So to touch on the contrast, you're spot on. It's totally different. And so I ended up working with the Texas men's lacrosse team because I was the personal trainer of their head coach, Kyle Hartzell, who's just a legend. And he's current head coach. While he was coaching, he was still playing, in the PLL, and now he's also the defensive coordinator for the Cannons. So he is a lacrosse guy. And what happened when I started training Kyle, I was working with him one on one, and I was also having the NFL offseason running at the same time. And Kyle was like, can I just jump in with them? And I'm thinking, all right, let's just see. Let's see. And I'm telling you, Kyle is just a straight dog. He was, I mean, doing backpedaling drills, stopping, starting, cutting, racing guys, throwing weight around. He won a push up contest that we had one day. Like he was just one of the boys immediately. Right. And so I trained him for years. And when it wasn't NFL offseason, we would work individually, and then he would jump in when the NFL guys came back. So during that time, I started working and just kind of helping out on the lacrosse side. They didn't have a strength coach. In Texas, football is king, so all the resources go to the football team, and then volleyball, and then men's basketball. There's an order of operations. And I worked with them one summer just focusing on speed. And this is where I can talk to the culture piece. The When Kyle got there, UT men's lacrosse was known, like many lacrosse teams, is basically just a fraternity. They're drinking beers, maybe they're drinking beers at the game, it's just for the boys. We're doing this because it's sweet. And the main focus for almost everyone is academics, and they just happen to get to play lacrosse. And they live in Austin, and they're going to go out. And then Monday, when you see them, you can't work them too hard because they're all going to puke. They've had a long weekend, right? And not to say that there isn't that in college football, but it is different. It's that stuff happens. It happens, but it's not the bedrock from which people are going to the school for that reason. And being a part of the culture shift of that with Kyle and the messaging, and that first year, a lot of guys quit the team, and he has since built a culture of winning and people who want to win, while also simultaneously having to balance the reality that a lot of these guys are here to have a good time too. But there has been a definite shift, whereas like football, and we'll stay with Texas. There is no fucking around. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah,
There's,
dude. What? Yes, please.
like guys go out, guys still have fun, but like, especially now with the way NIL is organized, there's actually even more incentive for you to show up, do your job, and put the team first. And with a school like Texas, they're so, especially now with where they're at in recruiting and the quality of player that they can get essentially at the snap of their fingers. There's not dude, if you're not showing up, if you're not doing your part, someone's going to take your job. And if they don't want you anymore, they'll get rid of you. They'll bring in somebody else who's willing to do the work. But yeah, the cultures, and even on the sidelines, dude, like in game, the vibe on the sideline when I'm standing there at on with the lacrosse team is so much more chill. Guys are chirping, talking shit, laughing, hanging out. Whereas there's some of that in football, but you better be watching, and you better be paying attention, or you better be meeting with your position coach. You know what I'm saying? So it's just a totally different vibe.
So I like that you used the word different and didn't go like better or worse. Like I would argue now, like, you found definitely a foothold in the football market. What is it about
Mhm.
football that has drawn you consistently back to that? Like obviously, lacrosse is not where, I don't think any sport is where football is as far as resources go, but what is it about football players and football training that really kind of grabbed your attention professionally?
I think like the first thing that comes to mind really is I just love football, dude. I grew up loving football. I was never particularly good at it, but the the work and effort and dedication that it takes for most players to be good at that sport, and the fact that training is such a part of the culture of that sport, um, it's really attractive to me. And I've also found that the kind of person who likes to play that game are the kind of people I like to hang out with. Like when I'm working, and same thing for the lacrosse. Like I like to go when I with the lacrosse guys. Same thing. Like I feel like I'm just chilling with the boys. Like it's great. But I also get that same thing with football, with particularly with the college and NFL guys. But just underneath being able to have some fun, there's this intense earnestness to get better most of the time. Some guys check boxes and they just, but by and large. there is a complete willingness and a desire to get better. And that, dude, I don't care what sport it is. I don't pop. If you show up and that's the energy you're bringing, like I'm getting better today, oh, sign me up. I'm in your corner, dude. I'll do whatever it takes to help you. That gets me going.
Now, what have you seen as the big differences in your time around football strength and conditioning specifically? Like, I don't think there'd be any argument that the cornerstone of S&C in America has been football, right? Like early days,
Yeah,
you may look
for
at
sure.
track and field and European influence, Russian influence on, maybe even Olympic weightlifting. But really, America grabbed hold of it, football grabbed a hold of it, and they are ubiquitous. When you think strength and conditioning as a position, you're thinking football first and foremost. In your time around football, like what have been the changes for better or worse that you've seen in sort of like the standardized approach? Like your front lines with the athletes in training season, in off season. What have you really noticed? Like, man, this is different 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
I think that there has been more of a willingness to emphasize results as opposed to upholding tradition. Now, I once heard a quote that said, tradition is just peer pressure from the dead. And I fucking love that. And so, but with football, there is such a sense of like, we're doing things the way they've been done. And that for me personally is a principle that I really struggle with. Um, I'm much more interested in trying to figure out how we're going to get better. And I think, and this is where I think sports science has forced strength and conditioning to shift more than I think people give sports science credit for, is when you start looking at data around adaptation and what you're trying to accomplish, you can't hide behind tradition anymore. You have to start making decisions that have specific outcomes. And the way that that's kind of evolved, particularly, and you know what? Like the NFL is just kind of getting to this place. It is not college, high level college football actually is by and large on average more ahead of the game in that regard than a lot of NFL teams, in my experience. But um, yeah, when you start focusing on just the outcomes instead of like the way things have been done or how we think it should be done or how I did it, how my strength coach did it, and who I interned with, how they did it, um, then you have to start making decisions surrounding like what actually works, which sounds like common sense when you say it. But I think the difficulty with tradition becomes if you've had success doing things a certain way, then it's kind of like, well, if it's broke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, sort of thinking, which works until it doesn't, you know. And I think another side of that, and I don't want to ramble too long, but it's like if you're doing things the way they've always been done, and they're working, not always. And this comes down to like how much impact do we really have on in as it pertains to the outcomes of a game? Is like, is this working because it's really good and it just works because this is a good way of doing it? Or is it working because we've got incredibly talented athletes and they're just really fucking good at football, dude? So anyway, I feel like I was all over the place there, but I feel there has been a greater shift towards making decisions that are athlete first, that are results based first, as opposed to just what has worked in the past.
So you find yourself in a unique position that I think is the envy of a lot of people who are in a more conventional setting. Like you working in the private sector, working with athletes in the off season, working with a sport that if you're not making it to the playoffs has an exceptionally long off season, right? I think last I did the math, it's something to like 32 weeks off season. if you don't make the playoffs, it's like that is an
Yeah.
exceptional amount of time. And it's an exceptional amount of time because you need it, because the sport is pretty brutal. But
Yeah.
in the position of being in the private sector, working with pros, who get to elect. They're electing to buy into this, right? Where you go, some guys, if you're overseeing, whatever a full roster of NFL guys, like they have to be there and they have to deal with the strength coach. And everyone is usually pretty good at getting buy-in, but certainly in a weight room, you're not going to have 100% of the guys who fuck with you. What is it that you
Right.
see now? Because you're getting the feedback of the 17 plus weeks of maybe not how you would do it. What are the next frontiers of like, hey, these are the traditions that we're still holding on to in the league, and then when I'm working in the off season, this is what I have to kind of like unlearn and unpack. That's still sort of like this legacy piece of strength and conditioning gone past.
Yeah, I think um God, because when you say that, my mind goes in a bunch of different directions from like the way what programming should look like, how certain exercises should be performed. For example, I'll use that um, as something because I like talking about this anyway. So let's say a back squat. Let's just go really like granular, like just the way an exercise is communicated and the purpose for that exercise. To me, when I'm teaching a squat pattern, I want a rib cage and a pelvis vertically. I want knees that are moving forward. I want the majority of the range of motion happening at the knee joint. I want to train quads, a little bit of glutes. And if we're getting low enough, some adductors, you know what I'm saying? Like, but quads, that's the show. Traditionally, systemically, what is coached in football, chest up, shoulders back, which is inherently not good or bad. It just is what it is. Chest up, shoulders back, weight on your heels, sit your hips back, sit hips back. And what you end up with is a bar that's moving A to B, but the motor pattern required to move that bar A to B is not training what I perceive to be a true squat pattern. It's a way to generate a lot of force. It's a way to move a lot of weight on the bar. And those are all good things, but how it's being done truly matters. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here when it comes to stuff like that, right? So, um, and then what do I end up with? I get guys coming off of season and people might be surprised to know that jumper's knee, patellar tendonitis, is incredibly common in football. And I attribute it to this unwillingness or this systemic coaching piece for guys to not really get into their quads, which I can go on a whole nother rant about surrounding the concept of quad dominance and how that's been demonized. And that plays a role into this. But when I get guys, like those are things that I don't know if unlearn is necessarily the right thing. I'm just making assessment. I'm like, okay, this guy doesn't want to bend his knee. He's sitting back into his hips. He's complaining about some knee pain. What if we just get him deep squatting with a vertical torso for a while, do whatever we need to and like, for example, and here's another example of this, put him on a hack squat, put him on a pendulum squat. I do both of those things. And I think a traditional S&C coach um, doesn't even consider that as an option a lot of the time. I think that's shifting. But like if I want to train a squat pattern, I want to train this guy's quads, I want to move them into get them some resiliency around the knee, then like that's the way I'm going to do it, you know? So that's like one piece, just even a squat pattern. There's like strength and conditioning is done in football. By and large, there's a way to coach a squat. There's a way to coach a row. And those things, they're not good or bad, but there are consequences for everything, good and bad. And so when I get guys, a lot of time it's about maybe just doing things a little differently so that I can get the changes that I want in a way that's going to benefit them the most. I hope all that made sense.
Yeah, and it brings up kind of the point I wanted to talk to you about because I find private sector guys so interesting because they do have a unique uphill battle, and that's on the side of communication. Like the best communicators I know in the strength field, with few exceptions, are in the private sector because they need that is their best tool. That like, in the training space, whether people are personal trainers or coaches or strength coaches at a certain level, I think everyone, or at least the majority of people that I intersect with, they look at working with pro athletes in the private sector as like the pinnacle. And it's
Mhm.
great. I think we both agree. We both love doing it. But with it carries so much weight on the communication side. You use the word unlearn, and I love the way that you frame that. And what you're unlearning is, someone else who they are told is the authority and is the authority that has an effect
Yes.
on team dynamics. Like how many times I got guys going into off seasons, and it's something that I've learned over time as I teach things, knowing what the standard might be. I'm also trying to teach them, one first year guy going out of a combine program into the league, we train them a certain way. It's like I'm preparing them to get trained a different way. Look, your strength coach might say this, and if you want a roster spot, I suggest you shut the fuck up and do what he says for now. Ball out, and then we can talk.
Right,
But to
right,
me,
right.
it's a testament to anyone in the private sector who can like hold it down off season over off season because you need to mitigate a lot of confusion. How do you approach the communication side of your job? Is it just come naturally, or is it something where you're like, there's a system to it or focus? Because I think that's where a lot of people lack. Like a lot of people can listen to some of the principles and they go, "Oh yeah, no, I get it. I think that way." It's like, great, you can think that way, but can you communicate how you think effectively to guys who are getting mixed messages and maybe wouldn't be inclined to listen to someone who's not their coach? How do you address that in kind of in your practice?
So there are, I think I have a pretty good understanding of like, as a person, what my strengths and weaknesses are. For the most part, obviously, I have blind spots, things I may not even be aware of. But one thing I know that I'm good at most of the time is just communicating, trying to get a point across. And I think that comes from like growing up. I feel like I wasn't heard, most of my life, and it became really important because I wanted people. It became such an emphasis in my life to try and articulate something in a way where you're going to understand me. Um, and the irony of that, of course, is like until you seek to understand the other person, you're probably not going to very effectively get them to understand where you're coming from. So, it's paradoxical in the sense it's like someone understands you, they can more accurately understand you the more accurately you understand them and where they're coming from and what's important to them and what they're trying to accomplish. And so, and I would also say that like my biggest asset is my ability to connect with just about anybody. I've got a good amount of life experience and not in a way where it's like, oh, I've been through this and I've done that and therefore I'm like an authority. No, no, no. It's kind of the opposite where it's like, no, I'm a human, you're a human, we've all been through some stuff. Like we can kind of cut through the bullshit. What are we here for? Um, and when it comes to like buy-in or you know trying to get a point across or teach something, what I've found to be useful in the way that I communicate in my experience is instead of like trying to build a case for why something is better or you know what, it's black and white. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. I think it's going to help you with XYZ. Let's see how that feels. I mean, I don't have to prove anything. I don't have to. Now, of course, if someone wants to know more about why we're doing those things, I invite them to ask questions. But the I think a mistake I made early on was I felt like I had to make this monumental effort to get you to really understand why I'm doing something. And a lot of times with these high level guys, They're there because they trust you. They're there because they believe that you have their best interest in mind and that you're going to get the best out of them. Shut the fuck up. Say, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And then here's the kicker. If what you're doing is getting the outcomes that you want, you don't, the buy-in takes care of itself. If someone's knees start feeling better after 2 3 weeks of just doing some leg extensions and some quad dominant squats, then that's it. Like I didn't have to like build this buy-in or over engineer what I was trying to accomplish. Yeah.
What was the transition? Because I feel like, I think a lot of coaches struggle with that plight of like, hey, this wantingness to over communicate, this wantingness to like prove that it is like, hey, no, this is the right thing. And
Hmm.
I'm as guilty of this, probably as guilty as someone could have ever been for this. I remember a few pivotal moments of like saying less with my athletes and getting like monumental results in just building the relationship. Like, you show up with this knight in shining armor, jousting equipment of verbiage and nomenclature and big words, and they're like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" I can't
Yeah.
even
Who
tell.
the
I just
fuck
see
are you?
slits of his eyes. And then, but so what was it for you? Like, was it a singular moment where, like, you had it click and you're like, oh, fuck,
Yeah.
okay, I get it now? Or is it just, I've done this enough times, I feel comfortable in this space? Because I feel like a lot of coaches struggle with, like, okay, when do I switch gears of trying to prove my value, my worth by trying to sound smart, and then just actually being confident in shutting the fuck up?
It was two processes running parallel next to each other. When I struggled with this the most was when I first started training, and I'm working with Gen Pop. I worked with Gen Pop primarily longer than I have with athletes. That's where I cut my teeth. Um, and I say jokingly, but like not jokingly, like if you can teach a 75 to 80-year-old woman who's never touched a weight before how to hinge correctly in a day, athletes are going to be a breeze. But I would do that. I would over explain things to clients and I would watch their eyes glaze over, and then internally I'm saying, shut the fuck, like, what are you doing right now? Like, I don't have to prove my worth to Kim, the housewife. I don't have to. Like, what am I doing? And then, so there's that one piece where it's like I'm getting some feedback that, like, you know, and then I'm also seeing and learning from other coaches, and I'm going to seminars, and I always notice that when people are talking at me and they're just piling on stuff, I just, and this is going to sound like a meathead way of saying it. I just say, shut the fuck up, nerd. Like, just shut up, dude. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Um, and then paralleling that is like growing up, just growing up and becoming secure with who I am, my skill set, and because that's what it really came down to at the end of the day. I wasn't actually most concerned about giving them the information that I felt like they needed. I was giving them the information I needed to give them to feel like they understood me and you know what I mean? I was proving it to me. I wasn't proving it to them. Most of them don't need me to. They're like, well, all right, I'll do it. So it was a self centered, very without knowing it. It was kind of just like a program I had running, but a part of growing up and just kind of maturing emotionally, I was able to recognize that, like, this isn't about them. I'm trying to convince myself that I know what's best, and I want to feel more comfortable in the situation about them doing it because I'm insecure around how they're going to take it. And I'm just an adult now. You know.
Yeah, I think. Oh, I mean, it speaks volumes, right? With the kind of the overnight success taking 10 years, when people are really trying to skip the queue now in the strength world, like, dude, when I don't, it's almost hard to explain to people that being a strength coach when I started wasn't cool. They're like, what do you mean it wasn't cool? Working with athletes is always cool. It's like, dude, it not only wasn't cool, it was like barely a job. Like it's not how so it's I think it's useful for people to hear because the lack of patience, I think I'm seeing, and like the wantingness to But the thing is, like, you need those steps. You need to kind of like have that conversation about Kim, because trust me, it's better to have that conversation about Kim and be like, yo, why am I going in on the mechanics and the anatomy for Kim? And you sort it out with Kim. Hey, Kim don't give a fuck because Kim's,
Right.
you know, she paid for a year up front and you're going to see her 3 times a
Yeah.
week for
Kim
an
loves
hour.
me. I can
Kim
say
loves you.
anything. Kim loves
Right.
me.
Yeah. Kim
She's going
is
to show
not
up tomorrow
up for,
regardless.
she doesn't have to re-sign a contract next year, right? Kim's not looking like, oh man, I hope I get this extension. Is this Tim guy really in my corner? Like, Kim is gonna,
Exactly.
until she's fucking 6 feet in the ground, she's riding. Oh, he reminds me of my
She
grandson. Like,
literally, Kim just sent me, I got an invitation this summer for her son's graduation. I haven't trained her in 7 years. You know,
yeah.
Kim, Kim sat there and listened to me fumble through all my dumbass explanations, which, by the way, are all wrong, at least relative to where I'm at now. Totally wrong.
And I just think like that is so useful to get that out of the way. Now, I
Yeah.
undoubtedly that was a superlative product for Kim, because right or wrong,
Hmm.
when you're Gen Pop, you're moving and you have that buy-in. You learn. You know, we talked about this on our podcast, on the Coach 'em Up podcast. This segment brought to you by Coach 'em Up podcast, and you were talking about just like, yo, I think people forget about being a likable person. You learn
Dude.
that in cutting your teeth, as you put it, in that, because you know, not everyone, sometimes you don't want to listen to Kim, but you got to rock up and
Yep.
you got to make that the best day of Kim's life, or best day of Kim's week, or the best hour of that day. And I see coaches getting into these scenarios with these pro athletes, and I'm like, tell me a couple of Kim stories, because I'm not letting the Kim story be the first round overall draft pick story. You don't get to make those mistakes at this level. It's
That's right.
crazy.
That's right. It's so true. And I think too, like, I'm so grateful that I got my opportunity when I did, to your point. And I wanted it sooner. I wanted it yesterday, when I finally got a chance. But now I've been in the mix for, what is it, coming up on 4 years now. And which is, you know, uh it's gone by like this, and in the aggregate, not that long. But boy, a lot happens in 4 years. Anyway, um, but I can see very clearly now that had I gotten that opportunity, to potentially take over an NFL offseason program and to put myself in situations to work with high level competitive athletes, God, do I shit the bed? Maybe, you know? Am I right? I mean, like, I don't know. I part of me likes to think I would have, done what was necessary to rally the troops and accelerate whatever I need to do personally to be able to meet the demand of what's happening. But I don't really know. Maybe I'm not here with you right now, Jordan. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm selling real estate, dude. But I'm grateful that things happened the way they did at the time they did, and I'm glad that I was working at that shitty startup gym in a shopping center next to a donut shop and a Subway in Tomball, Texas, 800 square feet, where I was training Kim. I'm so grateful for that.
You've done something that, I mean, you're in a position consistently where other coaches would look at and be like, "Wow, I wish I could do what he's done." And I think one of the things that's most impressive, that's always something that where I see a coach navigate this successfully, and by successfully I mean keeping their integrity, keeping their keeping their wits about them, and that's the social media side. Right, like with what you guys have done with the podcast, honestly, I think in our space and the time you guys have done it is unprecedented. Like we put our stuff up the other day, and I'm going through and looking at this and being like, I mean, I've been in the podcast world for 8 years now. And I'm like, this is unprecedented traffic. This is unprecedented feedback, but let alone your own social media account. What was the conversation you had with yourself? Because again, this is, I think, just a diary from a successful coach to coaches kind of sitting on the ledge going like, how do I do this? What was the conversation with yourself when you're like, hey, I'm going to utilize social media to build a platform, to build a business and a brand and a podcast and credibility and products and training services. How did that start?
Well, first of all, that is very high praise. Thank you. Thank you. Those are all very kind words. So that really means a lot coming from you. Um, Dude, I wish I could say that it was all a part of a plan and I knew exactly what I was going to do and how it was going to happen. But the truth is I didn't know any of that. I knew that here's what happened. This is the origin story is David Gray went on the Just Fly Sports Performance podcast. You know who David Gray is?
David Gray Rehab. I've had him on the show
Just
as of a
checking.
couple months
Just
ago.
checking.
Legendary
I
David Gray.
love that motherfucker. I love him.
Incredible.
So he comes on Just Fly Sports Performance podcast, and at the time, I'm a S&C sponge. Everything about my life is obsessed with just getting good. I want to be the best trainer possible again because I needed to prove it to myself. Um, and I'm listening to the podcast, and David gets on, and he talks about some stuff I'd never heard before regarding patellar tendonitis, jumper's knee, and some other ways of improving knee function through co-contractions and intermuscular coordination and concepts that I had up until that point not heard of. Um, and so I slid in his DMs and I said, "Can I work with you?" At this time, he had 2,000 followers on Instagram. Okay. And I start working with him one-on-one every week. He's in Ireland. He's coaching me up, queuing me up, and I'm getting better. And simultaneously, next to that, he puts out a product. And he starts going on more podcasts. And then I'm seeing the content he's putting out, and it's useful and it's valuable and it's for a specific audience that he knows that he can have an impact on. And he's doing it in a way that's authentic and not new in the sense where it's like shock and awe or like something you haven't seen before, but it was just unique to David. So I'm watching this thing happen, and he just blows up, and rightfully so. His product sells out of fucking control, and the entire time he never changed who he was. Never. He's the same David the whole time. And I'm meeting with him, and it's I want to say maybe it's the beginning of COVID, and um, we're having conversation. He's like, "Tim, you have to start posting." He's like, "You're smart, dude. You can do something with this." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't know, you know." And he was like, "No, you're gonna do it. Here's what you're gonna do." So David ordered me. He said, "You're gonna post for 9 days in a row, no matter what. You're going to go to other people's pages that you like and take the pieces of the things they like, but you're gonna make it your own, and you're gonna start to create a message. And at the end of those 9 days, we'll see what happens." And dude, like that right there, just that, watching David's success. And then here's the other piece. I'm sitting on my phone and I see David blow up, and I'm like, God, I'm so happy to see this kind of guy blow up. You know, a real one, someone who isn't just making shit up or squatting only to 90 degrees and telling everybody that it's, you know. Anyway, so sorry. So and then I'm looking at other people like that, and I'm saying these people are making a lot of money. People are consuming their content, and people are taking what they're saying at face value. And I'm saying to myself, what an idiot. And then I had this light bulb moment where I said, oh my God, I don't think this person's smarter than me, but they're having a ton of success and they're living out their dreams just because they were willing to do what I'm too afraid to do, which is put myself out there, you know? This person's looking stupid on purpose and getting like having and living the life of their dreams. And and here I am on my phone on the fucking sidelines, you know, passing judgment. And it was the combination of those. I'm like, so who's the real idiot? Is it me who I think that I can actually make a difference, that I actually have a message, but I'm sitting here on my phone, rolling my eyes and saying, what a fucking moron? Like, that's not doing anything to help anybody. So David's success, him ordering me to just start no matter what, in combination with, quite frankly, being a little resentful that people who I felt like, had no business having the levels of success they were having, or perceived success, right? What is success? But those things that was like this, you know, concoction of like what it took for me to sort of just take the leap. And then from there, Jordan, honestly, like I'm very blessed and fortunate that so many people like David, saw something in me and gave me an opportunity. Now, I put myself in positions to have those opportunities, but I've had a lot of help. I've landed in good situations. But when I've gotten in those situations, I've fucking nailed it. So far, I haven't shit the bed yet, Like I said earlier, like had I gotten that job 2 years before, maybe I do. But it's been a lot about timing, and then growing my own brand. Like frankly, if training NFL players helps you grow an Instagram page, dude. Let's play devil's advocate. Let's say I was a fucking moron, and maybe I am. But like, let's say that I'm just a total moron. And I don't know my ass from a hole in the ground from training. My page is probably going to do pretty well, just because of the kind of person that I'm working with. I like to believe that because I'm also a decent coach and that I'm coming from a place where I'm genuinely trying to help people and I'm able to formulate that content in a way that I think resonates with people, my page has been able to grow, right? But when it comes to social media and I know I'm ranting here, but side note, there are a lot of coaches who have big Instagram followings that work with high level athletes that are not great coaches. You know what they're good at? Communicating. They're good at building relationships. They're good at being at the right time. They knew a guy and they capitalized on all that stuff, right? When I got into performance, I saw that and I was like, oh my fucking God. I just assumed that because these people are working with high level people that they're high level coaches. Not true. And then, frankly, I think it gave me another edge, Jordan, because I cared about the training a lot and I could also communicate. And so from there, the Instagram really was like the launching pad. And then with Coach 'em Up, the podcast and building that brand, honestly, dude, I just want to learn from you. That's what it comes down to. I want to have Jordan fucking Shallow come to Collective for a weekend so we can throw around some weights. I want to talk shit with other coaches who like to do the same stuff as me. And then I want to hang out with them on a podcast. That's really, it's kind of just a like, if you told me, Tim, what could you do? Money, just blank check. What would you do? It would be, I'm working out with athletes and coaches, talking shit, and then recording that. Like that's what I would do as a sole vocation. And I would do the NFL offseason and train with the athletes on the side, right? Like those two things would work parallel. But that's how I would spend my time, hanging out with other coaches, recording that. And then crazy, it's like that's happening now. And I'm so grateful. I'm so blessed. And I know that was a really long ass answer. So I'm sorry if anyone fell asleep during that. Jordan is Canadian and way too kind to interrupt. But yeah, that's how that was the origin story. That's how it's transpired. And yeah, man, anyone who says that they're self-made and they've had all their success just because they outworked everybody, they're a fucking liar. I've never met anyone in my life who didn't have at least one person. And if it weren't for that person giving them a chance, an opportunity, mentoring them, telling them to shut the fuck up, which I'm about to do, they wouldn't be where they're at. So it's just been a mix.
How do you, it's kind of like a two-part question as far as, you've gotten here by, the good graces and the good fortune, but also the good work. Not to like,
Mm.
I don't let people put all of the other shit ahead of the stuff they actually do.
Of the
Like,
work.
yeah, because I think because I don't want people to be able to make excuses for those things. It's just you being humble, but like there is an
The
underlying
work is the
tenacity,
prerequisite.
right?
The
How
work
is
is
it that,
to me.
yeah, how is it that you, now that it's, Coach 'em Up is like, arguably probably the most popular coaching podcast on the planet. For the numbers, at least the outward facing numbers are would suggest that. Now that it's formalized, now that it's part of the workflow, now that it's not
Mhm.
just this, the circumstance of good fortune and good timing, now that it's established, how do you interact with social media platforms now, right? Now that it's a business, how has
Yeah.
that changed that initial approach? And I guess on the flip side of that, how do you give advice to people who were where or are where you were, understanding they
Mhm.
are where you were at a different time? Kind of a two-part question.
So part one, addressing, how have I adapted in my way that I've used social media, and how do I use it, to elevate the business? And, you know, I don't necessarily treat it any differently than I was before the podcast started. I just understand that I have an intimate understanding of, like, if I want people to experience this thing with me and to be a part of it and to jump on board, then like what I'm putting out has to be enjoyable. Like that ultimately has been, like, I think the catalyst for me is, like, I want to make content that I like making, that's fun for me, but I but what's also fun for me, Jordan, is that other people are enjoying it, dude. Like, it's important to me that people are, like, getting something out of this in a way that's, like, not just how it's kind of always been done, something a little new and a little fresh. And, like, if I don't watch a clip and go, like, I enjoyed watching that, then, like, no one else is either, dude. So, like, that's kind of the litmus test where it's like, um, if we're posting clips, or we're putting things together where we're, like, repurposing stuff, for example, from, like, our podcast, for example, like the clip we just launched. Like, when I watched that clip, I was like, "Fuck, that's good, dude!" Like, Jordan just dropped some, not, you know what I mean? Like, when I saw the clip, I'm like, "Hell yeah, Jordan nailed that!" And it wasn't because you were, like, trying to say something prophetic. If anyone listens to that podcast, it was just three. It was just the three of us chopping it up. It was awesome, and it's so that authenticity, that presence that you can only attain in a conversation that comes from being in the moment and actually caring about the dialogue. Those are things that I want to capture and I want to transmit, because I feel like so often with S&C podcasts or training podcasts or fitness, whatever, the formula is like, tell me about reps in reserve. And then you tell me about reps in reserve. And then I go, fantastic. I agree with that. Now let's talk about minimum effective volume and max effect, you know what I mean? Whatever. And I'm like, and those are all great things. And I want to be able to do that. But, like, God damn it. Like, isn't it so much better? Like, what if we took that information, but the vibe was like, we're just chilling with the boys, and we're like, we just lifted and now we're gonna go crush Terry Blacks, you know? So I think, right, like let's make that authentic too. So creating that experience for people has been my approach to the Coach 'em Up page. And people don't know this, but I actually started Coach Me Up pre-pandemic on my YouTube page, dude. I have 3 episodes. One is with Grant Fowler, Dan Bach, and Jake Tora. And it's just me. I'm still working at Lifetime. I'm trying to make my way into the and no mics, just me and my iPhone. The wind's blowing. You can't hear half the shit we're talking about. But it's like, I just wanted to learn from people that I thought were interesting and that I thought really had something to contribute, and then I wanted to work out with them and just talk shit. And so now it's like, you know, because of where my social media growth has gone and the building that I work at, I'm able to do that with Coach 'em Up. And then there was a second part to your question, Jordan. I'm sorry, I don't remember what it
Yeah,
was.
it was basically, when you started, you had a certain way of growing it. You cut your teeth, you came up, then
Yeah.
you kind of like none of it was none of it was deliberate. None of it was on purpose. None of it was a master plan. When coaches now they see social media intersecting with, whether it's Schless or you or Fabrizio
Hmm.
or, insert Max Marzo, they see the success that social media has is able to show as a byproduct of what you guys have done in your past. It's now often high on the priority list of people getting started. I guess the question is,
Yeah.
if you were to start now,
Yeah.
back then it was a little bit easier to deprioritize it and let things evolve into what they've become. But now it seems like it's one of the cornerstones of, like, I need a website and I need a social media handle and I need like a shtick. What would advice would you give for people starting now, or if you started now, how would you go about approaching it?
I don't think it would be fair for me to say anything other than exactly what I did, you know?
Mm,
So what I did was I, and guys, like people say the word obsess. I legitimately have OCD, like not like haha funny, like I do. I have that. Okay. And so I think that there were years of my development where I was, guys, anyone listening, I was so obsessed with trying to be the best trainer I could be. I was totally consumed by it. Probably to an unhealthy degree. I don't suggest that. I'm just saying that that's what I did. I just wanted to be good. I just wanted you to tell me I was good so bad. You know, tell me I'm good. And but I'm grateful for that because, like, in an effort to learn and consume as much as possible and learn from people, that was a huge thing. I've had so many people who, like, from mentorships to certifications where, like, I was able to lean on them and have them direct me and give me guidance and I could ask questions and I was willing to pay for that. you know like, I'm not talking just like DM someone that you like who has a big social media following and ask them 10,000 questions about how to do something. Like, I would pay for mentorships, you know what I mean? Like, I put skin in the game. And I've always done that. And I think what happened and I told the story about how the social media thing came on. That doesn't happen if I haven't done enough learning and enough training. That's the other thing, dude. You can't just learn and not be training people because you ain't learning shit. Some of the best lessons I've learned is that what I just learned does not actually translate in the way that you said it was going to, and so many valuable lessons in that. But I trained a lot of people, still do, probably too much with all I've got going on. I really need to scale it back. I just love doing it. Okay. Train a lot of people, being obsessed with being a good coach and getting results, being result oriented. Um, and then when the social media happened, it happened because I was ready to take the leap. And Jordan, we may have talked about this on the pod for a little bit, but like I was just like, all right, I'm gonna suck at this for a while, and I'm not where I want to be. But one of the blessings of that is, like, people saw me go from, like, just working with some high school athletes and college kids to, like, working with some more pros to, like, oh shit, that guy's like doing, he's like training real NFL players. Like, these aren't just practice squad guys, which, by the way, no, no, I love my P squad guys are some of my favorite athletes. No shade. I'm just saying perception from other people. Um, and so, I it's tough because you don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? Like, I think 80% of, let's say you're just starting off, 80 to 90% of your focus needs to be on training a lot of people and being the best coach you can be, and just and don't even think it's like, oh, I have to create this presence, or be yourself. Just document your story, you know? And what'll happen is, like, if you're really invested in it and it matters to you, you're gonna get better. And, like, I didn't, there's a creative part of me that really fell in love with making content. I didn't have an opportunity to express myself creatively really in most of my life. And then when I started creating content, I was like, oh shit, it's kind of fun, you know? So yeah, like I think the focus should be like being the best coach you can. You know, I think it can't go without saying, big believer in therapy for everybody out there listening, have had many therapists over the past 8 years. And growing up as a human and as an adult, I mean, my God, like, because here to touch on what I talked about earlier, if I don't do some serious maturing as an adult from the age of 25 to 30, I promise you, I don't even get my foot in the door for the opportunities I have here today. I'm not, I wouldn't have even been able to be responsible enough to manage it.
Now, what does the future look like? I mean, you've come so far. You've come far on I don't want to say impulse or spontaneity, but you've come far in like being present in the moment, doing a good job, having
Mm-hmm.
proper intentions. But now there's a responsibility. Anything that grows tends to grow more conservatively.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of people at age. As you get older, you kind of get more conservative. As businesses get more established, they go from being able to be a little bit more liberal to more conservative. How do
Mm-hmm.
you how do you take a look at coach him up at the training products that you have online and the product lines that you're creating and the programs that you're running out of Collective? How do you how do you reconcile like, it was kind of this take it as it comes attitude that got me here, but now there's like real like there's people who rely on me, there's people who depend on me.
Yeah.
How do you program yourself for the future as far as like all of the endeavors that you have on the go?
So I've been sober for a while now. Consecutively 6 years. That's not when I started that journey. We'll just put it that way.
It's like pushing over a pop machine.
Something, yeah.
Okay, move a little
it's
bit.
Yeah, it's right. You know, something that I've learned in that part of my life in that journey is to take things a day at a time, and it's a lot easier said than done. Um, But if I look at the entirety of, because I'm ambitious, dude. Like, I feel like coaches tiptoe around this. I want to be successful, like monetarily, bro. Like, I want to make some fucking money. Everybody listening, you feel me? I mean, what the fuck? I'm not trying to work at, Gold's Gym for the rest of my life. You know, I know you aren't either. There's not a person listening to this who's like, yep, this is the end game. I mean, if it is, great. I one day strive to have your inner peace. I don't have that. I want to see what I'm capable of, dude. And I want to know how big of an impact I can have. And so there's this piece of me that's really aspirational, and it's like this is what's been such a blessing about working at the gym I'm at and being around, people who have had a lot of success. And a lesson I've learned is like I would much rather fail at going big and know that I showed up, I did my best, and it just didn't happen, than to sit on the sidelines and watch other people realize the potential that they didn't even realize they had just because they were dumb enough to think they could do it. And I've seen it happen so many times. And I think my social media story is a really good example of that, where it was like, fuck it. Like, I'm going to try hard at this and let's see what happens. It worked. It worked. And the podcast, like I started that how many years ago? It was so bad. And then I got a chance. It was so bad. But it failed. It was a failure, right? It just didn't pan out. And then a few years later, I get to reboot it. And like, as of today, it's going so much better than I could have expected, right? But like, there is this aspect of like I don't even know if like aspirational is the word. Like I just want to know what's possible, and I'm really curious in that way, and I want to push the envelope. And there's a saying, and I'll go back to the recovery piece is like taking the next indicated action. Sometimes my brain, my anxiety, like I'll have a day from time to time. where it's like, I just have to focus on the very next thing that's in front of me. And that doing that is a skill. It is something that you get better at the more you do it. Just what is the very next thing I need to do to get to the next step? You know, who do I need to make this call? Do I need to answer this text? It can get that granular, you know? Um, and so, yeah, like I think I have this overarching vision of like where it would be so cool if Coach 'em Up could get to this place. Or if I could expand my social media to this spot or whatever. And being kind of excited and enjoying just the practice of trying to make that happen and being a lot less connected to like the actual outcomes, you know, because I don't know where it's going to end up, you know. And I've also had experiences where it's like, oh, you know, I want this to go this way. And then I get there and I go, God, I totally undersold myself and like what was possible. So yeah, anyway, I don't have any like end destination in terms of like expectations, you know, but there's this combination of like, okay, I'm just going to focus on what's right in front of me to get to the next step, whatever that is. And I'm aiming for the moon, dude. You know, I'm just aiming for the moon. And I'm also getting to a place now where it's like things are becoming more complicated from a business perspective, where there are a lot of things, Jordan, that I'm not good at, you know? But I'm also in a place where I'm able to bring in people who are good at those things that are going to start to have a stronger voice in the room, you know, about like marketing for the podcast and outreach for potential, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious now what it looks like as far as action items. Like you said, take it one day at a time. What's coming down the pipe
Yeah.
for you in the podcast? What do you got coming up?
So something that's just recently happened is you were the pilot. You were the first one that we did the workout with, dude. And oh, by the way, I got that clip back and I'm like watching it and stuff. And like so like the next indicated step for me there is like, okay, how can we take what we did with Jordan? What can we do to make it better? You know?
Everything.
Like
Get
Zach's my
someone
like
else,
Zach
and it'll be great.
stop it. Not true at all. If whoever's hanging, still in this podcast with us, Jordan, I wasn't able to make the workout because I was sick. This motherfucker is throwing around 150-pound dumbbells, rowing them like an absolute Sasquatch. It's a thing of beauty to watch. Can't wait for you guys to watch it. But you know, like there's just little stuff okay, it's like okay, like that was awesome. Like maybe the lighting was too harsh in that middle room. We're gonna do it in the front from now on. Zach's mic, he had it on all fucked up. He's in and out a third of the time. Your mic was great. You know, just like little things like that. Hey, where can we get better? Don't worry about wasn't the best. Let's focus on what we can do to get better. Roll that out, and then the next time we'll refine it again. And then the next time on the podcast when we have guests come on, I'm like, God damn, I said yeah 50 times. Let's not do that next time I go on a podcast. You know what I mean? Like I have a guest on and I'm like, I asked 3 questions that totally derailed their train of thought and did not contribute to the conversation. Tim, be better. So like there's always this for me, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, here's the art I've produced. Here's what I want to accomplish. This idea of, and perfection is maybe not the right word, but like the best version of what something can be. I'm probably never going to get that. It's like a mirage, you know, because the goalpost is always going to keep moving. But the more steps I take towards getting to that mirage, the greater the likelihood that like things are going to go off well. People are going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it more. And then it kind of gives me something to chase. Whereas like Jordan, maybe you have experience with this. It's like I got into this performance place. I do a couple NFL off seasons, some combine preps. I've got a kid that I worked with through college, all the way through college, through combine prep, gets drafted in the top fucking 10. I mean, I never thought that was possible. And then I get to that place, I'm like, damn, okay, well, what's next? Like, and some people may hear that and go, "You're an what are you talking about?" It's not coming from a place like of like I'm not grateful for it. It's just like it's in me to explore like what else am I capable of?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. I love the idea because anyone who looks at that mentality and would look at that trajectory of, high school to college to top 10 in the league and have a element of like, okay, yeah, let's go. If you look at that from the sidelines and you think that's a bug, and you don't see it as a feature, to use like computer terms, then those are the people who likely never get those opportunities. So it's like just framing
Yeah.
it, it's like that is a precondition to being a person who can do that. And what I love, the second thing that you kind of highlighted was like how your attention really moving forward is on the little thing. Because I think a lot of people can miss, and I think it's a really good lesson for coaches to hear, is that like even now at the success that you've gotten there by focusing on the little things because the little things make up the big thing, right? The little things quite literally are
Mhm.
your life. So like the fact that you're going, even where we're at now, staying the course, what the little things consist of are different. It's Zillner eating his mic halfway during the thing. It's the lighting in the room. It's all of
Yeah.
this. It's the number of, can I say like, or would you say, or can I say yeah 49
Yeah.
times
I got
next podcast?
I say you'll say something I go, "Yeah." In agreement with you, but it's like,
Yeah.
"Shut up, dude." Like
I love it. I think to me, it's such like a Southern thing. I feel like I'm on a
it
podcast with like
is.
Matthew
It
McConaughey
is.
that trades ways. Like waiting for like, all right, all right. But no,
All
I think it's
right.
big,
Yeah.
man. Like, and I think the thing that strength coaches miss is the ability to read between the lines. Like, you said a lot that could be, taken as like almost, and this wasn't how it was intended, but people could take your steps and they could try and replicate them, but they can't. But if you look at the principles of sort of how you got to where you are, I think that's the magic sauce. That's what's reproducible. And I think if you're listening to this, and most coaches, if coaches that still listen to our podcast, because they probably go fucking listen to yours now, all of the fans of the Coaching On podcast who still listen to RX Radio, no, I think it's big, man.
Jordan.
No, it's dude, I'm pumped, man. But no, I appreciate you taking the time, and I know you're busy, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. And we'll have to run this back. We'll have to do it home at home. I'll have to. I got a really good restaurant here in Toronto that serves like bear and deer. So basically, like the equivalent.
What?
Yeah, my buddy owns it. It's called Antler. It's a world class. It's actually like a Michelin restaurant. It's
Sign me
fucking dope,
up, dude.
dude. I'm
What?
standing in what would be your bedroom if you want to come hang. So I got to return the Terry Black favor in Canadian fashion. But dude, I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Absolutely. Dude, thank you for having me on. It's so much fun hanging out with you, dude. And we're gonna be doing more of this.
Yeah, I'm pumped, man. Thanks so much.